Hello everyone and welcome to Clickheads. I'm Eddie the Chump and today we're going to be talking about Riot's Project A again because some new information about its release date, beta testing and some other juicy gameplay details have surfaced in the last day or so. Now, the situation is there's quite a few content creators that have played the game, but they are still under NDAs concerning what they can talk about and when. Fredo's video from a few days ago covered most of what those creators were allowed to say, but there are a few sources that continue to drip feed information over time. And one of those is a website called Deepor.com, which is a Latin American esports website, and the other is a community Project A Discord. We'll cover what each source has said throughout this video. Firstly, let's talk about Deepor.com. In their article, they essentially say they aggregated the feedback from a lot of content creators that were at the presentation of the new facilities of the Latin American League in Mexico City. They go on to say, according to the data we collected from the content creators involved, on the 2nd of that month, meaning March 2020, another embargo clause will be released for people who could already try the game. Now this means we are likely to receive a big dump of relevant news on or around that date. And Deepor comments by saying, there you could announce the download date of the Project A beta. What is certain is that the official launch would not be postponed until 2021. It may be available in the last months of 2020. So yeah, March 2nd is a very important date for Project A. If I were a betting man, with the general consensus being that the game will actually launch in 2020 and not 2021, in March we will get a beta announcement, the actual name of Project A, as that's just its developer codename, and a lot more gameplay, hero and ability details. This timeline seems to me to be a lot more compressed than we had been thinking. Riot has been very tight-lipped, understandably so, but I think most people expected Project A to be far more distant than this information appears to suggest. I don't go in for a company like Riot wanting to avoid, say, a major esports finals of another game like Overwatch, which has its league finish its regular season at the end of August this year. Playoffs are obviously different, but they may decide that holiday season launch might suit their game the best. And with a beta possibly happening in March, I don't think this is too far-fetched. Now, here's something to think about. Is Project A coming to consoles? There are some things about the game that makes me think not. The gameplay appears to be much more like CSGO than Overwatch, something we'll go into later in the video, and that game was on the 360 and PS3, but the precision nature of the gunplay always meant that controller was never going to be the ideal input device, like driving a car using only the power of your mind. But consoles are changing, specifically the Xbox Series X. This is coming out in the holiday season as well. It has native mouse and keyboard support and will let players run at higher frame rates and refresh rates. This is key actually. I don't think anyone could argue that playing a first-person shooter on a high refresh rate monitor is almost essential at the competitive level, and if I was making a serious hardcore FPS, a platform that could utilize these modern FPS accoutrements would be the bare minimum. I'm not saying it's definite or even likely, but Project A could work on the next-gen consoles, at least in principle. How convenient they're releasing at very similar times, just saying. Now, back to the beta. I think that like most titles, there will be a closed online beta and then some open phases, which means that there will very likely be more than one beta period throughout the year, and almost certainly not all heroes and abilities will be unlocked straight away. Much like Overwatch, they might release more as the beta periods continue. This brings up an interesting detail actually, which I haven't seen discussed anywhere. Is Project A going to be single pick in terms of the heroes on each team? If it is, then there would need to be at least 5 heroes in the beta, as the format is reportedly 5v5. That's manageable for a beta for sure. Both sides would essentially have the same lineups, and as I say, they might release more heroes periodically like Overwatch did during its beta phase. I think the lessons have been learned about unlimited pick. There will no doubt be some heroes stronger than others. It is a new game after all. The last thing people would want is to see everyone playing the hero that has res, like in the footage that's been released. I mean, I say the lessons have been learned, but anything's possible. Next, let's talk about some information from the Project A community Discord, a link to which will be in the description. It's not an official Riot Discord, but it is an excellent source of information and a friendly place for gamers that are excited about the project. Here is where we found a breakdown of Turkish YouTuber WTCN's stream, where he talked more about his play experience. Now, this was in Turkish, but thankfully a member of that Discord translated some of the most interesting details into English. These are quite specific and can be related back to the footage we've all watched a million times by now. WTCN says that the hero that has the green smokes and green wall ability utility is quite hard to use. I guess this is in terms of making the utility practical, which is slightly odd to me because these abilities are quite similar to CSGO utility grenades, which are absolutely essential to the higher levels of competitive play in that game. Perhaps there's more direct, easier to use fragging abilities that outstrip that utility, but I'm guessing that when people have played a lot more, the true power of locking off lines of sight will come to the fore, especially as he also notes that that hero can manually shape the wall and its direction. That sounds pretty good to me. He also confirms that there isn't default utility in the game that everyone can use, but that there are heroes who have abilities that fulfill that role more directly, which makes sense. He does say that fights can become a bit of a clown fiesta due to all these abilities going off at once after the preparation phase, with fire, ice, and green gas taking over everyone's screen. Now, I think that's just a case of people learning the game and trying to use everything as soon as they get it. That doesn't concern me that much because these abilities work in an economy system and not cooldowns, so if there is too much ability spam, Riot can just tune the economy rates to prohibit that. Economy systems are great for balancing power for exactly this reason. You're very unlikely to get spammed by 5 AWPs in CS because it's so expensive, etc. What does concern me is that he apparently says there is an ice ability that slows players down in a given area. I'm all for area denial utility, but I'll always prefer smoke and incendiary grenades to fulfill that rather than a direct slow. I actually detest slow effects. I think they feel horrible to play against. Hopefully there's an immune ability in one of those heroes' kits, like being bubbled by Zarya or something, so you can ignore it in certain scenarios. Now, one thing that he does mention that interests me is that there is a preparation phase where players are locked out of certain areas of the map before the round starts. I'm not totally against that. Prep phases work well in games like Rainbow Six and Overwatch, but CS doesn't have them, and depending on the size of the map, I kind of think they can be a bit unnecessary. I haven't played the game yet, obviously, so I could be completely wrong about this. He does also say that once the prep phase ends, it turns into a direct gunfight immediately, which could be a design choice. Maybe the game is meant to be more instantly confrontational than the slower pace of Counter-Strike, for example. There's a collection of comments he makes that we've either heard before or intimated from the gameplay, like most main guns are insta-kill headshots, the netcode is really good, and the AK equivalent is really strong, which I kind of expected. He does mention that jumping will make you less accurate if you shoot, and that aiming down sight does make you more accurate and give you better spray control than hipfire. CS fans will find this easy to adapt to, I imagine. Also, apparently 128 tick servers, which is fantastic news. Anyone who has played on CSGO's native 64 tick versus a third-party matchmaker like Faceit or ESEA will know just how much of a difference this can make to a player. More details include that you can only throw curved flashbangs, you can't throw them directly straight, which is a strange choice, but I'm not going to judge that too harshly until I get playtime in the game. There's a very detailed crosshair editor in the game, which I personally love as I'm always changing mine in an effort not to be a bot. You guys have memed me a lot about my crosshairs in gameplay before, and I'm thankful to be able to create garbage tier crosshairs in Project A, so long may that continue. There is going to be friendly fire in the game, which is pretty much standard for tactical FPS. Even if some people could worry about griefing, Riot have traditionally been very harsh on toxic players, some would say bordering on outright draconian, so I don't expect that to be a major issue. There is a training stage where you can run drills and practice your aim, which is a godsend. If I have one criticism of Overwatch, it's that it took them way too long to introduce tools for players to create these stages themselves. Now we have aim servers and the like, but for years Overwatch players had a very basic training stage that wasn't really fit for purpose, whereas CS has had custom training levels for many years. Hopefully Riot open up this architecture so Project A players can do the same. WTCN does say that the res and knife abilities we see in the videos are ultimates, and others have stated they don't dominate play. You can expect to see them 1 to 2 times a match. They'll be very expensive in the in-game economy if I had to make a prediction, like an AWP in Counter-Strike, except not continuous if you use them and don't die. Perhaps the biggest detail he mentioned was that Project A will be free to play with no pay-to-win element. This is encouraging, as Riot have traditionally made players pay for new characters in, say, League, but at this stage it looks like they're going for a more Overwatch type of model, which if true is frankly amazing. Nobody really likes dying in an FPS to a hero you can't access without paying. New weapons in COD loot boxes were bad enough, but in an esports title, particularly considering the market around them, I'm glad they look to be going this way. Someone did mention in the comments of Frido's video that Rainbow Six does make you pay for new operators, and that example is perfectly valid. Players don't seem to mind that much in that context, but with the greatest of respect to Rainbow Six as possible, I think Riot are aiming at a much larger player base that includes many from games that decidedly don't have that mechanic in their games. I don't think CS players would stick around if elements of top level play were locked off behind a paywall. The same is true of Overwatch Overwatch fans as well, I think. One thing he did mention, but immediately backed off from saying for fear of having said too much, was that there weren't in fact specific spray patterns to weapons, which is kind of counter to what others have previously stated or implied. This detail seems to be more up in the air. These are still unconfirmed first-hand accounts. Yes, they've played the game, but the game itself is still being developed, so things like this are subject to change anyway. If I had to guess, the game will have recoil patterns to learn, but that they'll be easier than, say, the AK from CSGO, kind of like Apex Legends. Severe spray patterns can feel kind of wonky with ADS mechanics. The AUG in Counter-Strike does it fairly well, but it does feel weird for the uninitiated. I think Project A is going to be a hardcore title, but slightly more accessible than a game like Counter-Strike. They'll want everyone to get in, play and feel good. Apex Legends is a good medium ground, I think. The skill gap between someone who knows how to control the R99 or R301 recoil pattern properly and someone who doesn't is very noticeable, but you can still use the guns to get kills if you're a newer player, which is not necessarily the case with the CSGO AK. And that's about it for all the new info. Project A looks to be shaping up very nicely, and you can be sure that we'll keep covering it here on Clickheads. Let me know how you feel about all the details covered today and what your current excitement level is. Personally, I'm pretty hyped. I'll be even more hyped if ranked works more like CSGO than it does Overwatch, so I can get carried by my better friends in a 5-stack. That's something I really miss, and something Overwatch really taught me not to take for granted. Anyways, I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you do like the content on this channel, please hit that subscribe button and click the bell icon so you get notified when we upload. Until next time.